Welcome back to the Aggression in Dogs Conference. All of the talks are pre-recorded and played right here on the main stage. If you're having technical issues with the live presentation, a YouTube link will be provided in the chat box where you can watch the presentation in another browser window. Professional closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your video window. If you experience any other tech issues during the live presentation, please visit the info desk in the lobby or drop a question in the chat box. Information about continuing education credits, as well as a link to download PDFs of the presentation slides, can also be found at the info desk. Stick around for Q&A right after, also here on the main stage. And just so you're aware, there might be a slight delay of about a minute or so between the presentation and the Q&A session. If you have any questions for Denise, please enter them in the Q&A box so she can see them outside of the chat box. We also have lots of prizes to give away. If you are attending the conference live, you can earn points for that contest by engaging in activities such as visiting our amazing exhibit hall. I also want to thank all of our prize giveaway sponsors, including Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, APDT, Barking Brains, Blue Nine, Dogwise, Katina Jones, Karen Pryor Academy, Melena DiMartini, Paula Nowak, the Loose Leash Academy, Wolf Culture, and AggressiveDog.com. And now on to our next amazing presenter, Denise Fenzi. She has titled dogs to the highest levels in obedience, tracking, Schutzhund, Mondio Ring, herding, conformation, and agility. She has 2 AKC obedience champions, perfect scores in both Schutzhund and Mondio Ring Sport obedience, and is well known for her flashy and precise obedience work. While a successful competitor, Denise's real passion lies in training dogs and solving the problems that her own dogs and her students' dogs present. She is a recognized expert in understanding, developing, and channeling drive, motivation, and focus in competition dogs, and is known internationally as an engaging speaker and an expert in no-force training for sport dogs. She has consistently demonstrated the ability to train and compete with dogs using motivational methods in sports where compulsion is the norm. In addition to training and speaking, Denise is a prolific writer. You can find her at denisefenzi.com, where she maintains an active blog on all things related to dog training. Several of her books and articles have won Maxwell Awards from the Dog Writers Association of America. Denise thoughtfully and persistently works to down the barriers that prevent people from obtaining a truly interactive and mutually enjoyable sport relationship with their dogs. Fenzi Dog Sports Academy is the culmination of her efforts as a forward step in providing progressive information to any trainer who wishes to learn. FDSA is also our premier sponsor for the conference, and I truly want to thank Denise and her wonderful team for their support. You can learn more at fenzidogsportsacademy.com. I've had the honor of presenting for Denise at FDSA, and am truly grateful that she's bringing her expertise to the Aggression in Dogs conference. Enjoy her talk on understanding high drive dogs.
Hello, I'm Denise Fenzi, and I am thrilled to have this opportunity to talk to you about a subject that means a lot to me. Understanding high drive dogs and when the abnormal is absolutely normal. High drive dogs are a handful, they're a little different, and I love them. So I'm hoping that I can communicate some of my appreciation to you, at the same time recognizing that their behavior can be a little worrisome or troublesome or, stuff, right? Who am I? As I mentioned, I'm Denise Fenzi. I know a lot about this topic for a few reasons. First of all, I've been working with working dogs for about 30 years. It was actually my introduction to professional dog training. So I had a baby, I was going a little crazy because I was home, and somebody offered me an opportunity to work with some dogs for just a few hours a week. And it got me out of the house, and that was very important to me. And those dogs tended to be Rotties and German Shepherds and the like, because I was working at a Schutzhund club at the time. I think it's called IPG now, and then it was IPO, and before that it was Schutzhund. I was working at a Schutzhund club, and he had dogs that he was training professionally, and so he worked out a deal with me. And that is where I really started to focus on working breeds and working dogs. I did start with show dogs before working dogs, and I did put a Schutzhund 3 title on a show dog. I think that experience is probably what committed me to switching over to working dogs, simply because I never want to work that hard again. It was an incredible amount of work to work with a dog who had a wonderful temperament, was really quite a good dog, but wasn't bred for work in the same way. And that got me looking around and thinking about the alternatives. And after that, I did go ahead and switch over to working dog lines. I was scared. I thought they were going to be aggressive and it was going to be so much trouble. And I was unfortunately probably pretty hard on the first dog because I didn't know. And I look back and what a lovely dog she really was. Certainly no trouble. But she started my foray into Belgians of the working lines. Then I started breeding dogs. I did breed that dog. Her name was Soja. So I bred working dogs under the kennel name of Sprite for many years. I don't do that anymore. I think I'm credited with bringing working dogs to the United States of the Belgian Tervuren variety. So I established that here. In the 20 or 30 years I've been working with these dogs, I've titled many, many dogs in many dog sports, most of them in the Schutzhund IPO world. So I have several Schutzhund 3 dogs, but I've also done tracking for AKC, tracking for Schutzhund. I've done agility with dogs. I've done obedience and herding and many, many things. I'm currently doing Mondio ring sport, which is a biting sport. It's very playful, light sport. It is not meant to be aggressive. That hopefully will come across as we go through this presentation. I'm not the least bit interested in an aggressive dog. I have no need for a personal protection dog. I don't want one. But I do like a dog that brings a lot of work to the table, and I want to work with dogs who want to work as much as I do. And that is why I switched over to working lines. But it does come with a cost. So many behaviors have two sides to them. And many of the qualities I love, the ability of my puppy, a 6-month-old puppy, to work for 20 minutes without blinking an eye, that's great. It also means he's a super high energy dog and he makes a lot of trouble in the house when he's not working. So it's two sides of the same coin. Not good or bad though, huh? I also own FDSA, Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, and I teach a little bit there, but most of my time now is more administration there and giving stuff away on Facebook. That is what I like to do. So that's who I am. This presentation will star Dice. Dice is my puppy. You can see him here. How cute is that, right? But you can see the mischief in that face. He's biting a little metal cord. That is well and truly entertaining to him. He doesn't like to be tethered. He likes to do what he likes to do. He is a Belgian Tervuren from working lines. He is probably the best dog I've ever had. He is also the worst dog I've ever had. You will see some videos of him as we go through. What's good about him? He is exceptionally good with the technical aspects of biting. So without going into great detail, it means that not only does he like to bite toys, biting doesn't mean aggression. It means prey, toys, fun. He bites very well. He bites deep in his mouth. He sticks it out no matter what's going on around him. It means a lot to him to do that. So that's a big deal for a person who wants to do protection sports. He will work with anyone. I can train him tug. He'll tug with my friends, and he's super that way. So why do I say he's the worst dog I've ever had? Well, he chases cars, bites people. He doesn't like people. He won't go to you unless you have food or toys. He changes everything, but he's not innately attracted to people. He doesn't like dogs, so that's a challenge. I have to work on that. He's very busy. He doesn't sit in the house. He does not like to do things alone. That is something we'll talk about later. So you can't just hand him a bully stick and say, be busy for a half hour. He wants me to hold the bully stick, or he wants me to engage with him. He doesn't like to be left. So if I leave the room, he's going to scream. He can bark like you wouldn't believe. All right, he has a voice and he's happy to use it. So he brings so much I love to the table, that endurance, that he's affectionate with me, he's super sweet, but he also brings challenges. He would do very, very poorly in a pet home. I don't see how he could be in a pet home. He would be a misery, and he would run that household. So he would sleep on the couch and you would sleep on the floor. The goal of this talk for me is to help you recognize that high drive behavior comes with a set of behaviors that may appear abnormal, but are actually quite normal. I also would like to help you understand that there is a difference between, just because a dog is a golden retriever, it does matter if the dog is a purpose-bred golden retriever from hunting lines versus a show or pet-bred golden retriever These are not good or bad. I hope we can get past that way of thinking, but they're different. And if we can't acknowledge that they're different, then it's really hard to talk about them in a way that's reasonable and fair. People do get a little wound up about, oh, they should all be the same. That's kind of irrelevant. For the purposes of this talk, let's just accept that there are differences. I am hoping that you will learn to appreciate what purpose-bred dogs, some words you will find me using interchangeably, working line, purpose-bred, high drive. I use these interchangeably even though they're not all quite the same, and I'll hit on that later. I would like you to recognize the need for these dogs for people who need this kind of dog. I hope that comes across by the end of this talk. I will spend a fair amount of time walking you through the vocabulary of the working dog community. We'll talk about what I consider normal behavior. I'll talk a little bit about what I consider abnormal behavior, and we'll touch on some of the warning signs that you might need. I'm speaking as if you're not a trainer. You may be an owner, but when you need to be paying a little more attention to what's happening. All right, what we won't talk about. I'm not going to talk about managing unstable or aggressive dogs. There's no way in a short presentation I can go into any kind of detail on what you should do if. Plus, you probably know a lot of that, because if you have a dog that, let's say, is resource guarding, it doesn't actually matter if I might consider it relatively normal. You still have to deal with it. So we won't go into those details. Ethics. By the time I have taken you through this presentation, I think you are going to recognize why there might be some ethical considerations for the sorts of dogs we're breeding, because we're breeding dogs very close to the edge. And when I say close to the edge, I mean close to the edge of what the average person can possibly manage, even the average dog trainer. And if that's true, why are we producing dogs like that? So I find that conversation fascinating. If you ever meet me in person and want to have a beer and go through this, I would love to do that, but we won't do it here. I'm also not going to I won't go into details of training or fixing specific problems. That's a little beyond what we can do here. All right, what do I mean by a high drive dog? My definition, and I'm going to define because we all have our own ideas, a dog that stays in the game under adversity. So what do I mean by the game? Any game. It doesn't matter. What is the dog bred to do? I work with biting breeds. Those would be like Rotties and Belgians and Shepherds. They stay in the game of biting no matter what. What is adversity? Pain. They don't feel good. Fear. They don't like what's happening. Pressure. The pressure of the handler. The pressure of the environment. People watching. Weather. It's hot, it's cold, doesn't matter. Alternative interests. As a rule, high drive dogs don't have alternative interests in the same way the average dog does. So the average dog says, I like your cookies, I like to work. I also like to sniff the ground, I like to visit that dog. Working dogs that stay in the game under adversity stick with it no matter what is going on out there. We will talk about training methods because it is relevant how working dogs have been traditionally trained and how they are still traditionally tend to be trained and tend to be housed and tend to be thought about. Those things matter to us. So it's not unusual for them to have some pretty hard training methods, and they stay in the game regardless. So what game? Well, herding dog rounds up sheep 8 hours a day. If that's what the farmer needs, that's what the dog is going to do. A hunting dog goes out with the hunter in the morning, stays in the game until they come home at night. A biting dog, a military dog, a police dog stays in the game. In general, when I'm going through this program with you, I'm talking about working as opposed to performance. So working is the real thing that the dog is bred to do. It is something that the dog would still do it, even like a livestock guardian dog. And I have to say that most of what I talk about here won't apply to that. But the point is they are still purchased for that purpose. They're expected to do the work, and people aren't willing to spend a whole lot of time making it work out if the dog doesn't have it. The thinking is the dog should bring the skills to the table, should stay in that game, and should stay in that game even if it's not a whole lot of fun anymore for the dog. Sometimes the game is one you won't like very much. So for example, my puppy is bred to love to play tug. So one of his games is grabbing hold of me and biting down and tugging. Now, he doesn't do that anymore because he's 6 months old and he's learned. But that is part of the game. It's just not necessarily a fun part of the game. So take a look at this video. This is my puppy. He is 8 weeks of age. Let's look at what he does while I'm having a conversation.
So this morning I took him
He
out and
bites.
I was working on the car chasing issue, and I'm doing it with redirection to a toy, which was going great, But what I learned is that once he had that toy, there was no getting it back with food. He just wasn't going for it. So now what I have is an arousal issue.
So what I'm saying is not important.
Anyway,
Look
before
at
I
him.
get eaten, I need to just get...
That never stopped. So one day I was on a Zoom call with my team, and half of them had animals on their laps. Cats, dogs, puppies. And I thought, oh, that looks so nice. And my puppy was about 9 weeks old. I'm going to get my puppy and put him on my lap. And as my friends watched, they thought that was hysterically funny because it looked a lot like having a velociraptor on my lap because it just didn't stop. So that biting you saw there, that was nonstop for the first 2 months he was in my home. And I could redirect him, and I learned not to sit here and have a conversation with Facebook, because this was a Facebook Live, with him in my lap, because it made for a miserable experience, and it was hard on him and it was hard on me. Is it cute? I don't know. I guess it depends if you're the one that's being eaten, or if you're on the Zoom call and watching, or if the dog is sitting in your lap. So what is adversity? And we're going to look at my puppy again. My puppy is 11 weeks old here. I want you to watch what happens when he comes out of the car, but I have to give you a little background. He's 11 weeks old. This session goes on for 10 minutes. He has never trained away from home. So I've taken him in the car and I have driven to this location to see what he'll give me. We are near a busy road, so he is on a leash, which is, again, actually unusual. I don't think he's ever worked on a leash before, so that feels weird and different to him. And he is a very, very determined car chaser. So I've put him in a situation which is quite difficult, and watch what I get right out of the car. He knows we're going to work because he saw me back up and put my hand in my pocket and give him a cookie. Now he says, oh, cookies. I like cookies. He's not looking around at all. You can hear in the background a leaf blower. He's offering behaviors. A car goes by. A loud car. He says, okay. Now I'm not putting a cookie in his face, so he has to show a little more independent work. Another car goes by. Now he has to work even harder because he has to get his feet on that platform. Multiple cars go by. He sees them. If you watch carefully, you could see him look over there, and he's like, nope, I'm working now. The work itself with that reinforcement is driving him. So now I'm playing tug, and a motorcycle goes by. Look at the tenacity of that. I increased the level of energy I offered because of the motorcycle going by, and that stuck him in it. Now we're doing scent work. Scent work takes concentration. That's one reason I did it, was to see what I had. How much dog did I have? And then in the process of playing with him right here, I stab him. I stab the poor puppy in the eye. So what does he do? Not much. He sticks with me. So this is a clip from a 10-minute session that should rather clearly demonstrate to you what it means to be a high drive dog, because even at that young age, I already have a lot to work with. What breeds are we talking about? Working and purpose-bred breeds can be from the working group, the hunting group, terriers and hounds, but this presentation will be more focused on the working Malinois, the German Shepherds, the Bouvier, Dobermans, the Rotties, those dogs within the biting breeds, and within the hunting breeds, you've got Labs and Golden Retrievers and Spaniels. What I have noticed, which really interests me, is that the qualities the dogs bring to the table are often very similar, even when they are bred to do different kinds of work. The terriers and the hounds, they count, but I'm not going to talk about them. And the reason is I simply don't have enough experience with them, and I don't feel comfortable really saying too much. I will say that if anybody's watched a terrier try to get to a rat in the ground, you know that they're tenacious, right? The other thing that's a little bit different about the terriers and hounds, they're not bred to work as closely with people. So that does bring some different qualities to the table. Okay, so let's spend a moment talking about what I mean by a show line dog, a working line dog, a purpose bred dogs. The question to ask yourself is, within breeding, what is the primary goal of the breeding that's taking place? Is it how the dog looks? That's conformation. Is it the health of the dog? Is it a great pet dog? Some people are super focused on that. Is it a great working dog? Do they know what it takes to make good working qualities? The total dog. That would be when a person says jack of all trades, right? They're going for everything. What you're going to find is there's sort of a couple of distinctions. People who breed what they call purpose-bred dogs, if you ask them, they will say they are focused on what does the dog do, can it do it well, and the health of the dog. Whether they do focus on health or not is not relevant. If you ask them, that's what they're going to say. They're more focused on can the dog do the work and the health of the dog. If you ask a show line person, in general, what they're going to say is either they focus on the total dog, or they're going to say they focus on the conformation and the health of the dog, and they want a dog that can work as well, maybe. Again, what you do might be different. The distinction really comes down to where is the focal point. And I understand that the problem with saying I breed for the total dog is that there are hundreds of qualities that make up a dog. If you start including health and whether or not the dog is nice in the house and it's a working dog and what does it look like, it's really not possible to breed to the top of all of those because choices have to get made. So then the question really is, where do the trade-offs come from? And I don't think this is good or bad. I mentioned that once before, but it is reality. And you will run into clients who need this information, or you need it. Really, just as a dog trainer or a person in the world of dogs, you should know that there are different lines because it's, you don't want to get caught blindsided here, right? Not understanding this. Let's take a look at how the dogs look on the outside. I'm going to show you several. So over on this picture here, on the top you have a beardie, and on the bottom you have a beardie. These are both purebred beardies. The bottom dog is bred to work. So you're going to see some stuff as we go through these pictures right away that are sort of hints to you that something is different. Coat. Generally, working dogs have less coat, even in coated breeds. So you can see that right away. That's the most obvious factor. Look at these two dogs. These are both Cocker Spaniels from English lines. These are working dogs. Now, I don't have a picture of a show line Cocker. No one gave me one. But I think you know Cocker Spaniels and English Cocker Spaniels well enough to know that this doesn't look anything like them, right? Notice the chest, the size of the chest. That is very typical in a working dog. The colors are often different in working dogs. The ear set is often different. And again, coat. Coat is a factor, comes up a lot. Here we have two Labrador Retrievers. This dog on the left is a working line dog. The dog on the right is a classic show line dog. In my opinion, they're both beautiful dogs, and they're probably both very nice dogs, but they aren't the same. Look at the heaviness in the head on the working dog. Here we have Border Collies. On the left, you have working dogs. Once again, you see the difference in the coat. On the right, you have a show line dog. Not only do you have heavy coat, but the markings are different. So while I didn't point them out, as you go back and look, you will see that the show line dogs tend to be marked more classically. So this is classic markings with the white collar and the white feet. So now you have less coat and you also have more classic markings. You're going to see that again here. You have on the left a English Cocker from show lines, and on the right an English Cocker from working lines. Look at the difference in the ear set, the height of the ear. You see it in the eyes. The markings are the thing that really show up for me. Golden Retrievers. Dog on the left is a working dog. Dog on the right is a show dog. The dog on the left, the lighter build, that would be fairly common in the sporting breeds. You tend to see lighter built dogs. So the Border Collies are also lighter built. The Springer, the Spaniels are almost always lighter built. The dog on the right, the show dog, more coat, heavier build. He has a heavier head. Now this isn't true across the breeds, because if you look here, you have a Malinois on the left and also on the right. In the Malinois, you will find it reversed. The show dogs tend to be the lighter bred dogs with less substance, and the working line dogs tend to be the heavier bred dogs. Just a difference. And here we have a couple of German Shepherds. The dog on the left is a working dog. The dog on the right is show line. Again, here you have a heavier bred dog in the show line dog. That I don't think is necessarily true in working dogs. It happens to be true here. But the color is a classic difference. The show line German bred German Shepherd is very often red and black, very classic look. The body type is different, but I don't have a picture for you of that. The dog on the left is a sable. That is very common in the working dogs. And my last one, these are setters. Again, you see some real differences in the overall proportions and look, a real difference in the head type. So is it good or bad? I don't know. But what you should be saying to yourself is, if they look that different on the outside, so clearly the same breed, you can tell that, what is different on the inside? And the differences are where people focus their breeding program. So yes, the dogs are somewhat different on the inside. However, you can have crossing over. Some dogs in this pile of working dogs might have looked a little more show. Some of the show dogs might look a little more work. The same is true on the inside. You can have dogs bred for show that act a little bit more like a working dog, and you have working dogs that act more like show dogs. In my home, I have a dog named Lyra. She is working bred. She acts more like, in my opinion, a show dog. She's just a different temperament, much lighter in her behavior, much less determined about some of the games we play. And by coincidence, she actually looks more like closer to a show-line dog. So what behaviors might you see that would help you differentiate a high drive dog? Well, some of the bad things. They are busy. They tend to be busy. They have a lot of energy. As my friend said, we both got dogs at the same time. She said, it's not that your dog sleeps more or less, it's what he does when he's awake. And her dog sits quietly and chews on a chew. Mine does not. Vocal, very common for the working dogs to have opinions and be inclined to express them through their mouths. They don't tend to hold back. Mouthiness, lots of puppies' mouth, most puppies' mouth. The working line dogs can take that to a real extreme. And, you know, the thing is, even though they're not trying to hurt you, it still hurts. So it's something that has to be addressed. Lower need for sleep. I think they sleep less. They have a lot of go, go, go. Determined. Even from a very young age, you will often see them. They get on your couch, you take them off. They get on your couch, you take them off. 25 times later, they're still trying. So that's when you kind of stop and say, I need a different strategy. This isn't working for me. That determination is classic working line behavior. They are bred to persist. And while that's wonderful in the field when you're trying to look for birds, it's less great when you don't want the dog on your couch, your furniture, your counters. They'll keep persisting. So I call that persisting beyond reason. They tend to move forward in the face of fear. I would not say this is true of all dogs, but the biting breeds, the Shepherds, the Rotties, this is a classic thing to know. It's super important to understand it because you might say, well, he's not afraid. Look, he's going forward. It's almost wired into them to hold their ground or move forward when they are afraid. Great for a police dog, great for a military dog. It's not harmful for a pet dog, but what it does do is cause confusion because people don't understand what they're looking at. You want to know that they will tend to move forward. So if your dog has problems with other dogs, and if the options are going towards that dog, lashing out or hiding, you are very, very likely to see the forward lashing out behavior as opposed to the shutting down and becoming small. They are willing to contest you for a resource, even at a young age. This is true both with other dogs and true with yourself. So the dog has a bone and you want it, you can call it resource guarding. It may or may not be. But if they want it, they will fight about it. They will argue with you about it, and they will persist in that interest. One of the things I would say about high drive dogs, in the right homes, most of the issues don't even resonate because they're simply being addressed all the time. In the wrong homes, if the owner starts to become a little afraid of their dog, they read that right away. They read those pauses. So the dog is heading towards something. The owner stops and tries to decide what they think about that. The dog reads that pause and snags it every time. Once that cycle begins, you start to have real problems. And I do think this is a huge issue when you see, as a professional trainer, when you start seeing some of these working bred dogs, what you are seeing are normal dogs that figured out that they could get the upper hand and absolutely run with it. It has nothing to do with aggression. It has to do with power. And the dog determines that they can get their way and isn't too concerned about the fact that the owner might change their mind. So this is just something to know. These puppies should be structured kind of early on so that that doesn't become an issue. They tend to be very physical and pushy. They don't seem to feel pain in the same way. Doesn't mean they don't feel pain, but they're playing ball, they get the ball, they run into a wall, they shake it off, they come back. I know of a story I heard recently of a puppy was trying to chase a car. Owner didn't see this coming. The dog literally went headfirst into a cyclone fence, stunned the dog. Dog got up, shook, and continued to try to chase the car. So that's pretty intense, which also should give you a clue to what happens if you apply punishment, because it just often doesn't work. So I won't go into that into detail, but it's something to think about, that they don't necessarily respond the same way. Very common for them to mature early. I showed you a video of my puppy working at 11 weeks of age. Very common for them to have a lot of will to do things and to work and to focus way before you would expect it. You see this in border collies a lot. They're such an old soul. By 6 months of age, they're serious. They know what they're there for. Highly focused on a single individual. Very common that the dog not only bonds strongly to a single individual, but is a teammate to that person. They don't want to do things alone. They want to do them with their person, and they're not satisfied if they do things alone. Not interested in other dogs. Again, super common. Why would they be? They're bred to work and to do things, not to play with dogs. So you tend to find that they lose their playfulness with other dogs and puppies fairly early and just don't care anymore about them. Single incident learning is common. Those brains are always spinning. I think they're very bright and they make connections quickly. Huge desire to work and interact with the handler. I put this, I would like to point out, we're going through the bad bits. I'm going to run through this list again for that reason, but huge desire to work and interact. So how could that be bad? Well, it's bad when you want to get other stuff done. It's a pain in the butt. Reinforcers override safety and the environment. So your dog wants a ball. He has to go through a field of thorns to get it. He goes. He does it. He wants that ball. He wants the food, and he makes poor choices to get it. Very common for them not to have a lot of awareness of their body. And they just don't care. I have a picture. I don't think I put it in this presentation. My puppy was swimming and playing and running in the pool area. And when we were done, I put him on the grooming table, and I've never seen anything like it. He had taken his nails back so far on the back end that all you see are quicks all the way down the line. I mean, it's extreme. He had stubs left in the back, but he didn't stop because he was doing things. He was busy, and then it's up to me to figure out how to manage his behavior. The work is highly reinforcing. So again, how is this bad? Well, it's bad when you're not looking for work, when you just want the dog to be a pet in your house. On the next slide, what I want you to notice is that here I talk about the good bits, and the list is identical. Busy is great when it's focused. It's not great in your house. Vocal and opinionated is great when you're teaching your dog a hold and bark, or a search and rescue dog that is taught to bark when they find someone. It's not great when you have neighbors. Mouthiness, it's great when it's playing tug. It's less great when it's your daughter. Low need for sleep, wonderful if you want the dog to work for 10 hours. Less great when you go to work for 10 hours. Determined, a working dog that's not determined does not stay in the game. It's less great when it's your furniture. Persists beyond reason. We want that in our working dogs, our military dogs, our herding dogs, our bird dogs. You have to stick it out. It's less great when the dog's determination is to get to your dinner, which is on the counter. The tendency to move forward, same thing. It's good or it's bad. It's bad when your dog is going after another dog because he's afraid of it. The willingness to contest a person, it shows to strength. It's not so great in a pet home. Physical and pushy, same thing, not so great in a pet home. Early maturation, I'll tell you, I used to joke, all I want to do is pet my puppy. I don't think, and I wanted to do it before my puppy lost all his wool. It never actually happened. We never got to the point where I could pull him on my lap and have a nice snuggle and just scratch his head for, let's say, 10 seconds. Never happened. So all that early maturation and busyness, I didn't get to have a puppy. Highly focused on a handler. This becomes a problem because in our society, people want to interact with other people's dogs, and working dogs are often not interested in that, and then that offends or upsets or whatever, and that causes some problems. Not interested in other dogs, same thing. It shouldn't be a problem. It's a societal problem. People think that dogs should play with other dogs, and they're determined to make that happen, and all that determination often creates real problems because The dog just doesn't want to. It's kind of like if you had an introverted child and you were just bound and determined to turn it into an extrovert. People do that. They try to change the actual temperament, even though there's no reason to. But we don't always give dogs the same respect that we try to give to people. That single incident learning, it's wonderful when you want the dog to learn the thing you want to teach it. It's less wonderful if you don't. The desire to work and interact with the handler, great until you want to do something else. Reinforces override safety, great until you don't want it to, till you want your dog to have some sense. Don't run into the wall. Work is highly reinforcing, unless you don't have time to play the game. So is it good or bad? I think it's great. I love my working dogs. Why does it matter if you recognize that you are probably working with a high drive or a purpose-bred dog as opposed to just taking every dog for what it is? Well, there's a few things. So we're just going to touch these and I'll get to them in a minute. If you are working with a client, you can talk to them before they get their dog about which direction they might want to go. What if the dog is already here? Wonderful. Tell them how great their dog is going to be. There's different worry points. I would be concerned about different things in a certain breeds or lines than others. Slower to add intervention or medication if the behavior might be perfectly normal. I would tend to think more in terms of breed appropriate outlets when I'm solving behaviors. I'll get to that more. I think we have a desperate need for experienced and confident trainers of working dogs that are comfortable with them, that understand them and don't see them as a problem, see them as an opportunity. Socialization is often approached differently. For sure it is in the working world, and we might have something to learn from that. Interventions, when the dog shows some problem behaviors, they may be different, and that might be absolutely appropriate. So let's take a look at each one of these. Appropriately counsel your clients before they choose their breed. I have to ask you, does this actually ever happen? I mean, it sounds wonderful, right? That a person would come to a dog trainer and say, I'd really like to get a golden retriever. What are your thoughts on that? Wouldn't that be amazing? But it does happen. So talking to a person and saying, that's wonderful, you want a golden, what do you want to do with it? Are you looking for a hunting dog? How serious are you about that? Do you want a field dog? Do you want a working dog? Do you want to do performance? That's a wonderful thing. You need to know that there are strong splits. And if you don't know that, you're going to have a heck of a time counseling the person appropriately. What if the dog is already here? I'm a big fan of emphasizing what is wonderful. So when the person is saying, I don't know what to do, he's eating me, he won't get off the couch, he's driving me nuts, he's barking all the time, I like to reframe those things and say, wow, what an amazing dog. He's so smart, he's figured out how to climb your counters. That's pretty clever. Wow, what a physical dog. You can take that list I gave you of all the wonderful things and all the maybe problematic things, and you can really emphasize for the person all the things that those behaviors are demonstrating about how clever that dog is. And wow, he's trying to dig through your drywall to get the rat. Wow, what a great terrier. It's not great for your wall, but it speaks to who the dog is. And when you can get people to recognize their dogs and appreciate them for what they are rather than focusing on how they're not getting their way, I think you can change and reframe the picture to a more sympathetic one, and that can be all to the good for a dog. Different worry points of behavior. So here's an example. If an 8-week-old Malinois is sitting on my lap and I push it off and it doesn't want to get off and it gets angry about it and tries to grab me or growls or snarks at me, I don't even really give it much thought. It's just being young. I don't freak out. I don't get out food and try to train it. I just say, yeah, whatever. It's not important, and it will go away. I would be a lot more concerned if a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel did something like that. That would concern me, and I would start really wondering early on, where is this behavior coming from? Is there some mental thing going on here? Is this dog not what I would expect it to be? Awareness, always, no matter what breed, but concern is different. I tend to assume normal. So what does that mean? If a working dog, look at this picture, should have bit the stick, bit the hand, whatever, right? I don't think there's anything abnormal about that behavior. I don't add negative labels quickly. And that's something to think about because words really matter. So when you start saying, oh, he's aggressive, you pushed him off your lap and he tried to bite you, we have to fix it. You bring attention to what may be a non-problem, and bringing attention to it causes the dog to bring attention to it. If I see it as a normal behavior in that breed, I'm going to brush it off and not think twice. And then the puppy is more likely to brush it off and not think twice. If I think a behavior is normal, I'm going to be much slower to add medication. And I do recognize that we are adding medication to dogs younger, and that there's some evidence that suggests it's a good idea. That if a dog is showing certain problematic behaviors, early intervention is better than late intervention. I would suggest that a lot of behaviors in high drive dogs that would be considered concerning in other breeds and deserving of medication maybe should not be medicated. I will show you a couple of examples later on to discuss that. The other thing is, if you recognize that working dogs that are on your lap and being a fool is a normal dog, you start to pay more attention to time and maturity and management and less to behavior change. So an angry golden retriever puppy is going to cause me to look twice in a way that an angry Malinois puppy is not. And I'm probably going to spend more energy training that Malinois on arousal control and using what I'm going to call breed appropriate outlets for those behaviors. So, for example, if the puppy's constantly biting my sleeve, I'm not going to try to calm it. Trying to calm a Malinois is very frustrating. It's like taking a genius child in kindergarten, a crazy genius little kid sitting in the desk, and you're like, oh, good job, Johnny. Look at you being calm, dropping M&Ms and saying, now can we do our addition again? And Johnny's been doing calculus since he was 3. When you ask him to go back and do things that are not appropriate for his brain, and you try to calm him, you're causing problems. With a high drive dog, there's a lot to be said for the same thing. So rather than saying, oh, I have to calm him every time he starts biting my sleeve, I would be thinking, what is a breed appropriate outlet for this dog? We'll talk more about these matters. Less getting my way and more making it work for the animal. Add to that age, add to that time and maturity, and you can end up with a really nice dog. I do spend a lot of time not trying to calm the dogs, but trying to teach them arousal control. So I really like my dog to be able to go not moving at all, to very, very high, to not moving at all. So why does it matter to recognize it? I mentioned some of these in the last slide. I want breed appropriate outlets for the dog's behavior. So what is a breed appropriate outlet? What if the dog is highly visual? You take the dog for a walk and he's going like this. That dog may have a lot of predatory behavior, prey. We call that prey drive. What do you do with a dog with high prey? You give it things to chase. Maybe you play frisbee. Maybe you play games of chase yourself. You run with that puppy. Maybe you chase a flirt pole. Those are all examples of breed appropriate behavior for a dog with a lot of visual interest, a lot of prey drive. What if the dog is always listening, always cocking its head, always trying to hear what is going on around it? What kind of toys can you purchase for a dog that's really intrigued by sounds that will give the dog something to do, something to listen to? How might you interact yourself? What kind of tone might you use? What if you have a dog that wants to play tug all the time? That's the dog that's always grabbing a hold of you. Those are dogs that you're going to want to get things in the dog's mouth. What can they hold in their mouths? What if the dog is hunt-oriented? Hunting is using your nose. So when you take the dog out for a walk, rather than staring and looking, the dog's nose hits the ground and he's constantly searching for things to smell. That's what he does, which, by the way, is something I happen to love because dogs in hunt drive can hear you really well and tend to be responsive, whereas dogs in prey can really struggle with that. They're in a different place. So what kind of hunt drive games can you play in your house? Can you hide a toy? Can you hide cookies? Now your dog has a chance to use that nose and exercise that brain. That is very helpful. Those kind of behaviors, you can watch what the dog is doing, the puppy. You can think about what the breed is bred to do, and you are more likely to come up with appropriate breed-specific outlets for the dog that will actually work and satisfy the dog. Some dogs are just work-oriented. What do you do with a work-oriented dog? Well, if you have the option, you give it work. If you don't, you make it up, right? So you don't have any sheep, so your border collie doesn't get to herd sheep. That's just the way it is. What kind of work can you do that uses the dog's body and uses the dog's brain, which is what a herding dog does, right? A sheepdog. Can you use breed-appropriate outlets versus keeping the dog busy? So what's an example of keeping the dog busy? Giving the dog a chew because he's running around your house a lot. That might work. but it often doesn't. Because, okay, now I'm chewing it, but that's not what I need. That is not what is causing my behavior to be busy. It's not getting my needs met. So go back to that little genius child in the kindergarten classroom. It's not about giving him something random to do. It's about using the brain, and working dogs often really need to use their brain. Why does it matter to recognize it? Well-trained, comfortable, and accepting trainers are needed. There are no shortage of trainers in the world who work comfortably with high drive dogs, but they do not tend to be in the positive reinforcement side of training. And they may or may not be effective. That's kind of irrelevant. But if the goal, and one of my goals, is to encourage kind and effective training, then we need people who are already on board there to learn more about high drive dogs, to be comfortable with them. Otherwise, what happens is you're going to lose them to other trainers if you're not effective, or if you're just not comfortable with them. You might be hugely effective. If the owner doesn't think you're comfortable with their dog, that's going to be a problem. I would also suggest that probably structure is a really good idea for most high drive dogs, and less choice, more structure. And I know that in the positive reinforcement world, we tend to go with a lot of choice. I don't think a high drive, super powerful dog necessarily needs choice. What the dog needs is to be told what is expected. This is what I need you to do right now. These are things that we need. So I hope if you're intrigued by this, you'll spend some time learning more about those high drive dogs and become one of those trainers. Socialization. I'm going to talk more about this later when I talk about working dog breeders. But for now, let me just say that socialization tends to be approached differently in two respects. One, passive socialization is more common than active socialization. So passive socialization means you place the dog in circumstances that are a normal part of life. So for example, that is how we socialize our human children. We don't say, today I'm going to expose you to old people or young people. Today I'm going to expose you to the noises of the fair. You just incorporate the child into your life, and these things happen automatically. That would be how the working dog breeder tends to approach socialization, and that might matter. And socialization is also not generally seen as a route to changing temperament in the working dog world. It's seen as a route to getting the dog comfortable in their own skin, whereas I would say that often in the dog training world, we look at socialization as a fix-it, right? So the dog doesn't like people. Oh, he has to meet 99 more. I would also suggest, and I'll talk to you more about this later, that that's not good. It's not a great approach. Basic training and behavior interventions may be different. I did give you the example of the genius child in the classroom. So how about with a dog? What would be an example? Well, relaxation protocol, which is great. The idea is that the dog lays down and gets fed in some rhythmic fashion for staying, and you're trying to teach the dog to be calm. And I've seen this work beautifully with lots and lots of dogs, to the point where some dogs actually fall asleep, but not usually the Malinois. The thing about the working line dog, they spend a lot of time making connections. So they say, okay, I'm laying here on the mat and I'm getting fed. Wonderful. I think I twitched left and I got a cookie. Wonderful. So now I'm going to twitch left. It is very common that you will develop a dog that does not relax on the mat. The dog actually turns it into work. So you might want to rethink that choice. So recognizing that a working line dog might treat a relaxation exercise very differently and that it becomes work might give you some things to think about. Or even something super basic like a puzzle toy. Your average dog, you give them a puzzle toy and the dog's thrilled. It's a wonderful solution for many dogs to keep them busy. With working line dogs, puzzle toys can actually just build frustration. It's like what they want is you. They're looking for interaction. If you give them that, if you give them the handler and you give them the interaction, now they're satisfied. So you might well discover that what's satisfying to a working line dog is not satisfying in the same way that it might be to a pet dog or a not working bred dog. Another example, dog bites your hand. Very common. Dogs, all puppies mouth, right? Some dogs, you say, ouch, and they go, I'm so sorry. Working dogs very often don't say sorry. They say, oh, I'll bite harder. I like that it made you squeak. Not because they're mean or there's anything wrong with them, but you want to approach certain behaviors differently. The question I tend to ask is, what is your goal? And is it working? So if you say, ouch, and the puppy lets go, it's probably not how I would teach it, but who cares? It's not a big deal. That, no harm is done. With the working line dog, you really need to take a look at your standard choices of intervention and ask yourself, is this working? And don't smash a square peg into a round hole. You need to identify fairly soon that this intervention is not going the way I would have expected it to, based on the effects I've seen with so many other dogs. You need to be pretty quick to change a direction because they're individuals. All dogs are individuals. If something is wrong and you're struggling with your technique, there's not necessarily something wrong with the dog. It's the wrong choice for that dog. I would go there more quickly if I was working with a working bred dog than I would if I was dealing with a non-working line dog. All right, the vocabulary of the working dog community. I want to talk about this. Why do words matter? Words matter a lot. And knowing who you're talking to and how they are using the word really is important. So the word punishment comes to mind. I hope we all know that if you go out into the pet dog world and you talk about punishment, or if they say, I punished my dog for, fill in the blank, I think we all recognize that they mean something different than if you talk to a dog trainer who says, I would or would not use punishment in this example. One is a scientific use of the word, and the other is the common meaning of the word. You have to know both, and then you have to look at who you're talking to, and then you need to ask for clarification if you don't know. It's very helpful to know the basic vocabulary of the working dog population. Now, you can always ask for clarification, but you're going to be perceived as lacking in knowledge if you don't have a basic idea of what they're talking about. Again, it's always good to ask for clarification, but some people are only going to go for a few minutes of that. So let's get some words on the same page. You will also find that you have more credibility with your clients if they don't have to, if they feel like you don't get it when they say my dog has a lot of fight drive or prey drive. There's some basic things that I think are really worth knowing, and I found myself in some awkward conversations when I got it wrong and did not take the next step to ask for clarification. I'll give you an example in a minute. I do know when I talk to breeders from Europe and they talk about booty drive. What the heck is booty drive? Booty drive is possession. The dog's booty, like a pirate. First time I heard that, I didn't know what they were talking about. The other reason I really like to allow people to use their words, the ones that are comfortable, words have connotations. And if I let people speak in their own language and then ask for clarification afterwards, I will get a much better sense of how they feel about the behavior, because the words we choose. So if somebody says, my dog likes to grip objects as opposed to biting objects, there's information in there. Gripping actually has a positive connotation, and biting does not necessarily have a positive connotation. It's a minor thing, but it does matter, and it gives you credibility. All right, let's look at some drives in the specific. The ones we're going to talk about: prey drive, fight drive, defense drive, food drive, hunt drive, pack drive, ball drive. Thresholds, what do they mean by that? And civil behavior. You will also see the word extreme tacked on to almost all of these. Extreme prey drive, extreme fight drive. What are they talking about? And maybe more important, just in case that person does come to you who has not bought a dog yet, what combination makes a good pet dog? Let's find out. Prey drive, what does that mean? Prey drive does not mean literally chasing and killing prey. It means visual tracking and fascination with movement. So a dog can have high prey drive and not be chasing rabbits. And I hear this all the time. My dog has so much prey drive, he chases rabbits, but he won't play with me. That's yes, it is prey drive, but that's not the meaning in the working dog world. Prey drive means using the eyes. Hunt drive is using the nose. So when the eyes take over, the dog is in prey drive. You might look at something like ball drive and recognize that when the dog is watching it, there is an element of prey drive when the dog fetches the ball. Ball drive implies more. I'll get to that in a minute. So, prey drive. It's not aggressive. Even if the dog kills in prey, it's still not an aggressive behavior. How does one define aggression? Well, killing you would think is aggression, but if a dog is chasing a rabbit and kills it, is it an aggressive behavior? Yes. Is it an angry behavior? In human terms, when we talk about aggression, we're usually talking about anger or emotions. When a dog kills a rabbit in prey drive, he's not angry. He's actually probably having a wonderful time. It's a game. It's the game of chase. But you need to understand, or it's helpful to understand, that it's not angry and it's not aggressive. It just happens when the dog goes into visual tracking. Fight drive. Dogs that are high in fight enjoy the contest with another for the sport of it. Now that could be good or bad. In the world of biting, and we're playing tug, what it means is that when you add pressure, the dog doesn't object. He actually likes the fight. The harder you fight, the harder he comes back at you. We would call that fight drive. We love that in protection. It means the dog pushes and pushes, and when the dog wins, he comes right back and he wants to do more. I like that. It's useful for me. How about if there's a roast on the counter and my dog gets it and I say, ah! And the dog's like, I'm going to get it first. And the harder you try to pull that roast out of the dog's mouth, the more determined he is to get it. That's fight drive too. Maybe it's less desirable when it comes out of that place. Fight drive does not imply aggression at all. The dog can be absolutely having the time of his life and he's fighting with you. So think of it like this. Two people are playing tug of war. Humans are playing tug of war. They're not angry with each other. They're not aggressive with each other, but they're having a contest and they both might really want to win. And when one side rises in intensity, the other side, if they have a lot of fight, might rise right along with them. But there's no anger in there. There's just reaction. All right, here's my puppy. This is puppy Dice. You're going to see prey drive. Look at how he focuses on the object over the person when she swings it. He's got no animosity towards her. He's focused on the object. This is a game. Notice how much he loves the game of fighting with the decoy over that toy. Who's going to get it? And then notice what happens when he wins. There's no aggression going on here. This is not personal. He's having a wonderful time. And the more time he spends fighting with her, playing these games with her, the better he is going to love her because she understands him. Prey, watching the object go back and forth. Fight. Stays in the game.
How many people became one puppy? Lots. Not a boy. Around the back. Yeah, you got really run though.
He goes for a little run. That's to increase his prey interest. He chases her. Look, he just goes right back. He doesn't care. He's not feeling angry or aggressive at all.
Oh, but when you're in shorts.
That's an example of fight and prey. He likes her. This is not personal. Defense is generally associated with some courage and aggression. A dog in defense moves towards a threat. The dog may be afraid, doesn't really matter. The question is, what direction does the dog go when he's afraid? Forward or away? Dogs in defense will come forward. They will fight. When you're in a fight-flight situations, they will fight. Some dogs, we say they have extreme defense. I don't know if you want that in your life. That's trigger-happy dog with low threshold. A low threshold means it takes very little to cause the dog to react. So when you look at a situation and the dog has a choice between retreating and leaving or going forward in the face of fear, the dog may well have very high defense. It's not a great thing in a pet dog. And if the person fights back and causes the dog harm, and the dog is afraid, and the dog believes somebody's breaking into the house, and this is serious business, what does the dog do? Will the dog bite? Will the dog fight? If yes, we would say the dog is high in defense. Food drive, I think you all know what that is. It's just what it sounds like. It has nothing to do with hunger. It is about eating for the sake of eating. Every morsel is dessert. Every morsel matters. I like this picture on the left. You had a golden retriever who just did in that peanut butter jar. And on the right, I don't know what kind of dog it is, but it's enjoying its food. It is very common for working dogs to have more interest in toys than food, even if they have high food drive. You will find that at a young age, many of them will switch to more interest in work and in playing with toys. All right, hunt drive. This is using one's nose. Bomb dogs, drug dogs, tracking dogs. Here you have a nice little tracking puppy. It has nothing to do with finding prey. How is that possible? Hunt drive can lead to finding prey, but lots of dogs, like this dog tracking, he's not going to find prey. He knows it and it doesn't matter. It's the using his nose, that activity in and of itself is what he cares about. Now let's just say this dog was tracking and a rabbit popped up, and let's say he was tracking a rabbit, just for fun. At the point that the nose comes up and he's watching it, he's now in prey drive. He's not in hunt drive anymore because he's not using his nose anymore. It is absolutely not aggressive. I love hunt drive because it's usually a dog that responds easily. It's usually a happy place, and you can use it for all sorts of things, right? Dogs that enjoy searching are easy to wear out in your house because you could play those games, and people love to play hunt drive games. It's fun to watch your dog doing those things. Pack drive is about the dog's cooperative nature. how the dog interacts with the handler. It has nothing to do with other dogs in a pack situation. That's not what's meant by that. It's a dog that stays with the handler even when the training is terrible, and even when the dog isn't getting anything, and even when the dog doesn't want to do it anymore, when the dog's not having fun. It has to do with the dog's willingness to work with the handler to maybe keep the dog, it could be different things, to stay with a good status quo. With a person, the dog will stick it out. This is Reika. This is my own dog. Some of you know that picture because it's on a bunch of books and stuff. That is Reika to a T. For the last several months of her life, I trained her in obedience without classic reinforcers like food and toys. The story of why is long, so I won't go into all of that, but I will say that it wasn't a problem. She stayed in the game because that is what we did together. She had a lot of pack drive. Ball drive, just what it sounds like. It's fetch. However, the thing about ball drive is it's prey and pack together. Prey as the dog goes out, pack as the dog comes back and wants to interact with you. You can see this in an 8-week-old puppy. It is a standard in most puppy tests where we evaluate a dog for its working ability, because it shows up very early. The predatory interest is to chase the thing and then pick the thing up and then bring it back to share it with you. Now at that age, in an 8-week-old puppy, the dog doesn't bring it back to get you to throw it again, because that would be a trained behavior. He brings it back because he wants to be with you. So we would say that was a dog that was high in ball drive and pack drive. So ball drive exhibits both prey and pack. And if it's extreme, we would say the dog is a bit of a fool, and that is not unusual for dogs to get hurt playing ball because they're so fixated on it that they cannot stop when they should. You end up with heat stroke and all these terrible things. So ball drive is actually quite useful, because if you have a dog with a lot of prey interest and visual tracking and it's causing problems for the handler, playing ball can be a fantastic outlet for these dogs. It is something to chase, and there's really limited downsides to a dog with a lot of ball drive. Thresholds. Low threshold means the dog loses its ability to think clearly quickly, and he goes into a strictly reacting frame of mind. So dogs with high thresholds are much easier to work with because they think clearly for a long time. Low threshold dog, you make a mistake, they kind of flip out on you, and it can be very hard to keep them in the game. It's not all bad. We talk about dogs that are twitchy. It means they see everything. So there could be a place for that. Dogs that are twitchy and seeing everything tend to be low threshold. It's great if you're a trainer who's very experienced and knows what you're doing and moves quickly. It's not a great thing in a pet dog. It can be quite problematic because most pet dog owners still need to think themselves without worrying about the dog. The other thing with a low threshold dog, they see the ball and they can't function, so forget training. They see the food and they can't function, So it can be a very tricky thing. The high threshold dog thinks well under pressure or under excitement. The dog is what we call clear-headed. Civil. This one is fascinating. The first time I heard this, I thought, okay, civil behavior. That means a nice dog, right? The dog is civilized. No, it means the opposite. It means a dog that will fight a civilian. It is associated with aggression and defensive drives. It is not sporty. A sporty dog is looking for equipment. Look at this picture here. You have a dog who is looking at the person. This person is using equipment. So the one I showed you of my puppy, all focused on the sleeve itself, that was sporty behavior. This dog is showing civil behavior. He is focusing on the man, on the person. Wonderful for police or military. For me, my worst nightmare. I don't want a dog who wants to bite people. I want a nice dog. This doesn't mean the dogs run around and bite people. I trained with a friend the other day who has a civil dog. The dog could care less about me. He's busy doing his work. I'm just there. He's fine as long as he's working. But I probably shouldn't reach out and pet him if he's not expecting it, or if he's not trained to accept that because he doesn't want me to pet him. I'm not his friend. I'm not his enemy, but I'm not his friend. He doesn't necessarily want me there. This is more complicated in a pet dog. Most pet dog owners are going to struggle with a dog who is willing to bite if he doesn't like what's happening to him from another person. There's a lot of misunderstanding in the working dog world about some things here. Anxiety versus drive. It is very common that a dog is showing anxious behavior and it is confused for drive. You should know that because you will hear people say to you, oh, he's got so much drive, and you're going to look at it and say, it looks like anxiety to me. Be aware that you may well be right. It is misunderstood. Movement is not drive. Some people see a dog who's frantic and moving all the time. They call that drive. Drive has a focal point. So if there's not a reason for the dog to be moving, it may be a dog who has a high level of need to move its body, but that's not drive. There's no focal point. Anxiety is not drive. Dogs can be both anxious and driven. It's not even uncommon, actually. But be aware that they're not the same thing. There's going to be misunderstanding there as you talk to your clients. Very common. So what is anxiety? Well, when a dog is panting excessively and whining and moving hysterically, I see anxiety. I find that many working dog owners and breeders see drive. To me, drive always has a focal point. So if I ask myself, why is the dog showing those behaviors? It should be clear cut. The dog wants a ball and he can't get to it, and he doesn't know how to get to it. The dog wants to bite that person who's wearing a sleeve, and he doesn't know what to do to get to bite that person. Now, in that second example I gave, you had both. Anxiety is the dog didn't know what to do to get to the person. The easiest way to get a dog clear-headed is to make sure the dog knows exactly what he needs to do to win. And this does matter with your pet dog clients. If you're seeing anxious behaviors, then ask yourself, because the dog wants the ball, and the owner says, yeah, but he keeps grabbing my hand. Does the dog know what he needs to do to get you to throw the ball? Lie down or sit or whatever. Have you clearly communicated that? Dogs that know what they want, what you want, are less anxious. Working dogs are somewhat prone to these problems. I'll talk about that later. Make sure you have clarity. What makes a good pet dog? Moderate drives. Social dog. You want modest prey drive, modest ball drive, modest everything. Again, if you get to choose before the dog is in the house, these are things we want. When somebody starts talking about high prey, high fetch, high hunt, I get nervous, right? What does that mean? I want a moderate dog for a pet dog. I want him sociable, low in defensiveness, high thresholds, clear-headed. When you're talking to the breeder, these are things you want to be talking about. These are words you want to use. If they say dominant, I don't know what they mean, so be very careful about that one. I once imported a dog to breed to him. The owner told me he was dominant. I said, dominant with people. Well, that was interesting. I said, do you mean he's not social? Because I would not breed to a not social dog. She said, no, he's social. He's just dominant. I didn't get that clarified. I wish I had with hindsight. What she meant was, social as in he can be in social environments, no problem. People can be around him. Dominant means you can't touch him. Live and learn, right? You don't want to hear about dog aggression. You don't want to hear the dog is not social. You don't want to hear that the dog is civil. These are not pet dog traits. I'm recording right now. Okay.
I'm going to James.
If you're not clear on the meaning of a word, so if someone says the dog is dominant or the dog has highly social or civil traits or anything, ask for an example of the behavior. So, what do you think would happen in this circumstance? Or are you saying, take the time to ask for very specific examples. So now we're not using words. Now we're going to be describing behaviors. And that is much more likely to end up with a situation where you're on the same page as the person you are talking to. It's very important that you be on the same page. All right, continuing on. There are some traditions in the working dog world that I find a little different than in the show dog world, where breeding takes place. Quickly, kenneling dogs. I'm going to address each of these. Nature over nurture, traditional training methods, and not a lot of recognition of emotion in dogs. Kenneling dogs. Why do I care? Well, in general, it's common for working dogs to be kenneled. And what that means is that the breeder often doesn't have information that would be kind of important for you to know. They don't know if the dog is good with kids. They don't know if the dog has separation anxiety. They don't know if the dog has excessive mouthiness or energy or anything. It's not good or bad, but if you don't live with the dog in the home, there are things you're not going to know. So just be aware of that. It's not malicious. Nature over nurture. Most working dog breeders place way more emphasis on genetics. So if the dog is a mess, they think it's genetic. They don't tend to attribute it to training or what we do. And that does impact socialization, which I'm going to address in a minute. But they really do tend to feel that genes create the dog. And if a dog is not a naturally good worker, then that one tends to be called from the breeding program. And another dog that is a naturally good worker is substituted in. They believe that you're building a glass house if you take a dog that doesn't bring it to the table and try to work with it. So back to socialization. I mentioned this once before. I'm going to address it a little more intelligently now. They don't tend to actively socialize the way the show dog world or even the positive reinforcement pet dog direction is taking it. There is much more emphasis on letting the dog just grow up. So whether in your house or in the kennel, which doesn't mean not taking it out. You do take the dog out, but you take it out the same way you would take it out as an adult, and you take it to the places you would take it as an adult. So I call that passive socialization rather than running through with a checklist of all the things you want to do. The dog simply experiences the world as it happens. They very often do not encourage interaction with other people or other dogs because they don't think it's important. You can take that either way. I personally like it because I think it allows dogs to be who they are. The social dogs will go up to other people and the person will say, hello, dog. The ones who aren't social will not, and then they each become comfortable in their own skin. It's really about treating a puppy like what it will be as an adult. Another thing to think about in this approach is they tend to avoid triggers. So if the dog doesn't experience chasing cars, then it may well just outgrow it. And honestly, they often do. Maturity often gives the dog the confidence it needs to behave better without really having an issue. The other thing I really like about this is it avoids labeling. When a young dog at 10 or 11 weeks goes out and barks at another dog and we all say, oh, he has problems with dogs, we label them. And when we label, we hyperfocus. And when we hyperfocus, sometimes we create problems where there aren't any. That is not terribly common here. They tend to socialize their dogs just like they would a human being, much less focus on the matter. Traditional training methods, I would say that suppression is absolutely the norm. That's the traditional training is what you're going to find. If the dog barks too much, you put a bark collar on it. Strong corrections for unwanted behavior, it may or may not work. But what it does mean is that if your client has a breeder behind them who thinks that's the solution, and if you are more of a positive reinforcement-based trainer, you might find yourself with a bit of a struggle because the breeder may not support what you are trying to do and may say, well, if you would just put a collar on him, this would be solved. There's not a lot of recognition of dogs as having rights in and of themselves, which doesn't mean they don't love their dogs. It just means that when you're talking about a situation, a breeder situation with many dogs like in a kennel, often the dogs are more of a tool, right? So you have sheep, you need the sheep rounded up, you get a dog. So it's utilitarian. I'm not talking about the owners of individual dogs. That would be different. But again, you're getting back to what is the breeder telling the person and what is the breeder's expectation, and you might find that. In summary, traditions. Traditions are what we tend to find and what we tend to see. You might find that when you're trying to work with your client, the breeder's perspective could be, this is the dog's genetic, it's what he is. He's a good dog or a bad dog, right? Oh, he's got these problems, he's a bad dog. It's not even worth the trouble. Or you just need to come down harder on him and we can solve these problems. So these are things you're going to encounter fairly often in the working dog communities. They may, when you say is that, well, are the parents good with kids? That would be very normal for them to say, I have no idea, because they just don't know. The dog wasn't raised that way. Be aware that they don't see socialization the same way. Of these various things I've just talked about, I tend to agree with the working dog community. I tend to see socialization more as time goes by as something that should be a little bit less focused and a little more passive. What is abnormal? When should we worry? Let's take a look at some of the things that are classically problematic in our world. I think OCD is fairly, I hate to say common, it's not common, it's just that I think OCD is an easy result of breeding for a high drive dog. So what does OCD look like? Well, the question I ask is not does the dog do a thing, it's what happens if you stop the thing. So let's say you have a dog that chases shadows, lights, bugs, chases its tail. If it moves, it does it. Okay. What happens if you stop that behavior? What concerns me is if you stop one behavior and it turns into something else. So you got the dog not to chase shadows anymore, and the next thing you know, he's hyper-focused on bugs in the yard. That to me is when I start to pay attention and maybe start to worry a little. Here's a video of a border collie. This is a fairly common thing for border collies to have OCD type behaviors. But here's what's really interesting. This video, the dog is going to dig at the floor obsessively. The dog does this a lot all day long. When this video was shown to working dog owners and breeders and border collies, they said, don't worry about it. Don't let the dog do it. Redirect the dog. It'll outgrow it. When it was shown to positive reinforcement trainers, they said medication. Let's look. This is a stressed dog. This is distress. The owner of this dog worked on this behavior in various ways, did lots of great stuff. The behavior continued, even though she did all kinds of good things. Interesting thing happened. She went on vacation, left the dog with a friend for a couple of weeks. The dog came back, wasn't rehearsing the behavior at that person's house, and has never done it since. So I don't know. Just be aware. Don't be too quick to intervene. But when you see something like that, you have to do something. You can't let the dog do that. That's a distressed dog. I just think it's very interesting to notice that people within the breed don't pay attention in the same way. Or they'll say, just don't let it rehearse the behavior, and then they stop it at that. All right, aggression. Let's look at this video. What are we looking at here?
Okay, Tanner, he's coming your way.
Kayla, keep out of it, please.
Ask yourself, is this normal or abnormal behavior?
He says, I'm hiding behind camera so I can't get to the
What do you think? What I see, when I'm teaching a dog to play tug with me and it's not bringing the toy back, the way I teach it, I reach out like that little boy did, and I give it a little tug and I let go and I back up. I call that tiny tugs. You may have heard that term. I consider this behavior problematic, but I don't think the dog has a problem. There's two different things. The problem I see is anything that is perceived as aggression within a home, whether the children are afraid or the adults are afraid, needs to be addressed because of the perception of the people. And people who are afraid of their dog or not comfortable with their dog, that's a problem. This dog's tail is wagging. He's vocal. This dog is just noisy. I don't see a problem dog. I see a problem situation. So what I say is, if there is a perception of aggression in the home and the owner feels like the dog is aggressive, it actually really doesn't matter if the dog is aggressive or not. Steps need to be taken to make everyone feel more comfortable with the situation. In my opinion, I would not allow these kids to play tug with the dog. I'm going to show you another video with the same dog. This dog, in my opinion, is probably quite a good dog and has a lot of sense of self and importance and simply needs his world structured in a way that can't make mischief. But the important thing I want you to get here is it doesn't matter if the behavior is normal or abnormal. I think this dog's behavior is normal. It is still a problem that needs to be addressed in the house. Let's look at another example of the same dog. Notice the dog's on the couch, gets off. He has an object. There's a child behind her on the couch. He wants her to play with that toy. He's putting it up there. He's getting a little over aroused. Now he's targeting the kid in the background. My video stopped. Sorry, let's try again. We'll try that again. Again, the vocalization, I think it's the nature of the dog. I don't think there's anything wrong with the dog. He's frustrated. Can you see that? Hear that? He's bringing the toy up. He wants something. I think the dog wants to be on the couch. The dog is allowed on the couch. I did ask the owner. Now he's escalating a little. Some frustration in there, right? Something is agitating this dog. Yeah. Did you see that? So there's a problem.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
You can't have a dog doing that. It doesn't matter if the dog is a normal dog. Now, I got more information on this dog. I know more. I don't think this dog should be allowed on the couch. She mentioned if the dog is tired, it gets much worse, much crankier. That's something to consider. I don't think this dog should have toys laying around because they cause the dog to escalate in behavior. When you're talking about aggression in a home, especially with children, when there's discomfort, you have to address it. You can't let it go, regardless of normal or abnormal. So aggression might be towards other dogs, towards family, towards strangers. It could be resource guarding. You're going to handle it the way you handle most cases, but just remember it's not that important if it's normal or abnormal. Anxiety. Let's look at my puppy. Morning, Chris. He certainly looks cute in there, and you can see he has a nicely stuffed. Hear the whining? But he'd rather complain right now. Classic puppy behavior, right? I want out. I don't like being in there. Here's the things that's worth noticing. One is that I gave him a very delicious topple filled with ground beef. Doesn't want it. He wants me. Second thing that's worth noting is he's so young. Yeah, he's like 9 weeks old here. Who cares, right? The only thing is he continues to do it for months, right? We haven't really resolved this. So what I did, I think there's a little thread of anxiety in there, a little bit of issues. He really can't settle. He's chronically up sometimes. Covering his crate and putting him in a dead quiet place absolutely solves the problem. He just stimulates easily. So abnormal, normal, I don't know. I have to solve it because I can't live with him crying all the time. That's not reasonable. And your people can't either. But I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I certainly wouldn't medicate him for issues of anxiety. I would simply structure his environment in a way that he can be successful. Shyness and aloof. It's interesting. Shy and aloof really kind of mean the same thing. The difference is that aloof is written into breed standards and is seen as a perfectly acceptable trait, and shyness in our society is not. I think it is a temperament trait. Personally, I would leave it alone if it was not affecting the dog's quality of life. So where does it affect dog's quality of life? Well, if the dog is shy in its own home, like with people in the house, well, that would be a problem. I mean, how can you live with a dog who's scared of people? But in the world, we'll just make different choices about where the dog goes. I find that accepting them is all it takes. The thing is, if you take a dog that's shy and it has aggression because it's a working bred dog and you push it, it may well bite. So don't push it. You know, you don't change a dog. If it's an aloof dog, it's an aloof dog. Set up the situation so that it can be comfortable. I just don't really believe you can change a dog's basic temperament. You can bring out the best in the dog. And I've certainly owned dogs that were not social. They were not against people. They weren't biting anyone. They just preferred to be left alone. And they knew that I would make that possible. If I had guests over, I would just put them away. All right, so who should address the issue? A trainer, a behavior coach, a vet behaviorist? I think all dogs of working lines should see a trainer. I just think you're going to head off a lot of problems at the pass, and I would love to see that happen. Does it happen? No, probably not. But I can dream, right? I'd love that. Behavior coach. You know, to me, that's a person who specializes in problems. Just be aware that when you start bringing in a behavior-focused person, you're going to start labeling. And when you start labeling, you create behavior plans. And now you may well create a problem where there isn't one. So I would absolutely start with a trainer. Things need to be pretty extreme before I would be bringing in a behavior person, unless the purpose of that behavior person was to help the average person just raise up that puppy because they know it's a lot of dog. But be careful about the labeling. You don't want to label. Vet behaviorist, I would be looking at that under a couple of circumstances. If you solve one problem and a new related one just pops up, that would worry me. If you focus on solving a behavior and it's getting worse, or it's causing significant issues for the dog or society or the family, I would start looking at that. Or if drugs seem to be appropriate based on if you're a trainer and you talk to a veterinarian, that seems to be the direction you're going to go, then a vet behaviorist for sure. But being a high drive dog is not abnormal and is not a reason to incorporate medication or veterinarians or any of that. It could just be a dog that needs some structure and some training in its life. So that's roughly the order I would look at those things. What is abnormal? If the dog is suffering, or if the family is suffering, or if society is suffering, you need to get help. See a trainer if you think it's basic and you want to get a foundation and fix the little details before they become problems. See a behaviorist if the problem is established and appears to be getting worse, or it's causing problems for any of those above individuals, dogs, family, society. see a vet if it's something that seems to, you solve one problem and it seems to be rotating around, or if the dog is showing extreme signs of anxiety and you think there might be more going on and that drugs might be part of the process. All right, so in summary, I've certainly covered a lot of territory. We could have pulled out any one of these areas and spent an hour on it alone. I love working dogs. I hope you appreciate them a little bit more as a result of this. I think there are so many things about them to love. There are a few things that are maybe not to love. They will keep you on your toes. They are a lot of dog. But I think it's wonderful if we can learn to appreciate them for what they are, rather than worrying necessarily about molding them into what we want them to be. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.